I think story is the most effective strategy for imparting wisdom. Story is the greatest psychotechnology that humans have ever come up with, aside from humor, I guess. Whatever it is that compels us to impart information in the form of story is the greatest possible achievement for our brains. It's incredible.
Welcome to the Mindform Podcast, where we delve into the minds of some of the most interesting people on the planet, discuss psychology, philosophy, and personal growth, and share the wisdom we uncover with you. Join us as we explore the art of forming our minds. Here's your host, Frank Lawton.
Yeah, I think that's great, man. I think that's great for your psychotextual development, that you're picking a thing that is you, really you, and just focusing on learning that instead of like learning how to learn or continuing, there's something detached and cyclical about the focus of your personal development just being yourself and your development, like putting your focus into something tangible out there and consistently and giving time to that is, I think, really necessary for any real growth. Like I saw this, I've been spending a lot of time on Substack recently and started Substack, and I'm really enjoying that space. And I saw a post recently saying something like, just reading self-help book after self-help book, in a way it kind of validates this idea that you're not good enough and it's really cyclical. Like you're going to get a lot more growth by like picking something you're passionate about and like investing hours into that every day. Like stop reading self-help books and start doing that would be a massive improvement. Not
It's
that it has to be one or the other. But yeah.
I went through a phase, definitely, like right out of college, university. I say that like university was by far my least, basically my least, like it was the lowest point in my life. Like not to be dramatic, it just like happened to be that way where like I just wasn't the ideal person I wanted to be. I was being bombarded by like crazy coursework, wasn't surrounding myself with high quality people for me, and like so it was a compounding effect of kind of me just being hopelessly lost. And I got into I'm grateful for the fact that I mustered up the willpower to basically just download a ton of self-help books and just start binging.
Same.
And trying desperately to kind of crawl out. And I found, after about a year or two of that, I found a very similar intuitive conclusion where it's like at a certain point, half of these books are kind of just peddling tripe to you anyways, where it's just like, do the best you can or whatever. Like, and then the other half is like genuine wisdom and knowledge, like a lot of the stuff that we discuss here in Mindform. But even so, like it reaches a certain point where, just like you said, you kind of have to take something by your own, like by the rein. You got to grab the reins yourself and kind of dive into something that you're really passionate about. I'm grateful and I feel extremely lucky that I've always had music and creating music and playing with sound as kind of the backbone for my own self-expression and creativity. Even if I've never made like $1 off of it or anything like that, it's always been just so important that I do it. And I've never even thought about quitting doing it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And yeah, I agree. I think your sentiment that it's really valuable in a certain moment of life or at a certain place in life. Like, I agree. Like, I mean, self-help's been a huge, huge, huge part of my life. I mean, that's why I'm on this platform. I'm all about it, and I will continue to be. But I think there's a certain trap that one can fall into, that I fell into, like, for more than 2 years. Yours is 2 years, me was much longer, where it was just, that was the journey. That was the only journey. And, you realize it's like, okay, actually I've downloaded a lot of great ideas here. Now let's just put those books aside and start like implementing them in a real place.
Yeah.
Hey, with that, that's probably a good pause. I will jump into the intro and we'll get into it. So yeah, let's go. Kia ora from New Zealand. Welcome to the Mindform Podcast. My name is Frank Lawton. I'm a father, a husband, and a contemplator. with a passion for ways of operating which empower us to live wholeheartedly. The Mindform Podcast is an extension of the Mindform platform, and similarly, it's a space dedicated to exploring and altering psychological landscapes together. In each weekly episode, I'll spark a conversation to mine for gems of wisdom and just collaborate on the game of architecting our minds. Most of our guests are members of the platform. We're all big nerds for psychology, philosophy, and self-improvement. Real keen to be talking to Kyle today. Kyle Douglas is this week's guest. He's yet another, I think maybe all but one of our guests have been founding members of Mindform. And since the start, we've been blessed by his enthusiasm for connection and for growth. He designed and published on Mindform a program called Superhuman Sleep, which optimizes like all different kind of dimensions or components of sleep, from sleep hygiene to REM to lucid dreaming even. And I haven't done the program, although I'm starting to feel like I need it as my son does a bit of sleep regression. It's been highly praised by the members who've gone through it. And at the inaugural Mindform retreat in Blue Ridge Mountains, he blessed everyone with improvised live sound healing music whilst they were led through an exercise in active imagination. And I'm so gutted I missed that. In the pictures, everyone looks absolutely just in a completely other universe. Kyle's a gem, and I'm really keen to explore his mind a bit deeper today. Welcome to the Mindform Podcast, Kyle.
Thanks, man. You're a great host. That was an excellent intro.
Thanks.
Yeah, man. I can't believe it's been, I think it's been more than a year or 2 years since I did the sleep program. We would love to see you do it, especially the father of a newborn. It's probably the exact type of person that would need to reset his sleep habits. But yeah, man, I'm stoked to be here, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. Now just feeling a bit flowy, I guess, zoned in. So let's get into some of these questions I have for you. I really want to know more about the psychology of sound healing. I guess I'm curious in two ways. Like you've said that like you really believe in it. Like it offers a lot of value to people who listen to it. But I'm also curious about I guess your psychology around sound healing. But what is that?
Yeah, man. So I guess a good place to start is like personally about me. Like I've kind of always been obsessed with music and sounds for as long as I can remember. Really is my first true love as a young adult, or even goes back to like age 5 or 6. We used to have home movies of me like dancing to Michael Jackson videos and stuff like that. Like I've always just kind of been totally obsessed with music. And that being said too, as I became a young adult and kind of went through school and everything like that, I leaned into science quite a bit. There were a couple of things that sort of informed that for me, because I spent a lot of time kind of in hospitals. I sort of had surgeries at a pretty young age, and I was kind of exposed to that world of like health and medicine pretty quickly. And basically, I was like, yeah, if I'm going to go to school, I would like to learn how to help people and heal people. And that said, too, I sort of always kind of was curious about the world around me and like the natural world, how it all works and everything. And so I sort of had these two opposite sides, kind of these two opposite forces in my head. I don't know if I should say opposite, but these two unique forces in my head, an absurd love for music and creative arts, but also pretty strong passion to lean into science and healing people to some capacity. As I, went through school, got pretty deep in biological sciences. That's what I studied. I went to university for that. And I now have about 5 or 6 years of biotech industry experience. I work for a startup company that does like gene therapy. And so I work in a lab, and I'm by all metrics, involved in science and kind of like the cutting edge in a sense. But this is all to say that I've kind of compartmentalize this truth about where I'm at, that it kind of doesn't satisfy the thing that I fundamentally wanted it
Mm.
to. Um, the I don't feel like I'm helping people or healing people in the capacity that I always thought I would. And the rigorous process of being a STEM major in school really took a lot of time out of me, dumping time into making music and expressing creativity in that way. And so I sort of have this constant battle of like how can I figure out how to satisfy my need for both of those things. So this sort of all is a long-winded uh, journey that led me to start thinking pretty open-mindedly about where I should go professionally, like as a career. If not, working in a gene therapy company, if this is not really doing it for me, to sum it up, what will, right? And
Mm.
I tried to sort of keep my mind open, and I guess discovered I've been trying to look online for I've been open for years about like, okay, where can I go next? I tried coding. Like I went into I kind of became a crypto bro, weirdly enough, for a little bit. Like I don't know why that I thought that would help, but I've gone through these phases of like working on a bunch of different projects, just sort of like to figure out where I need to be. And long story short, I've kind of stumbled into a lane of science that's called sound work or sound healing, where essentially practitioners use just basically the physical nature of sound to either just uh, calm people or sort of, as like a de-stressor. The most common example would be sound baths. They type of basically think of the music that you hear in like the background of meditation apps and stuff like that. These kinds of tones are considered to be sort of healing or at the very least calming.
Mm.
But sound work is a separate uh, tangential avenue where they're trying to use healing frequencies like in hospitals to help kind of to help the birthing process is one example, but also people in like the ICU and stuff, that they can sort of just create this environment of like healing energies that is just really supposed to be more conducive to positive healing
Yeah, okay.
processes
So my
for
question
patients and
about
stuff.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, my question is, I can easily see how just the relaxing mechanism of sound healing can have a totally measurable impact on things
Hmm.
like birthing, healing in general. Like, is there understood to be more going on than just that? Or like we know that when people are hearing this music, their sort of nervous system enters a more rest and digest kind of
Hmm.
mode. Is there
Hmm.
more to it than that, or is it really about communicating to people's nervous system to to calm?
Yeah. I so I guess it kind of depends on who you're asking. Uh it's my understanding that uh there are different avenues, like say for example, have you ever heard of binaural beats? Have you ever seen that
Yeah.
like on YouTube for so binaural beats is a pretty interesting example because it is kind of rooted, it's very clearly rooted in quantitative science. There is a lot of physical proof that you can kind of create these two oscillating tones, one in the right ear and one in the left ear, at two different frequencies, and it creates this beating phenomena. And that beating effect activates your corpus callosum in the center of your brain, which helps bridge your left and right brain hemispheres so that they are in sync and firing at the same time.
And this is
That,
yeah,
yeah,
this is a mechanism understood to be at work in other forms of, because it sounds like this is EMDR, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
eye movement desensitization, like because people say, if you don't have it, you can do this.
yes,
I was just doing a beat that wasn't left right then, but for So is that a
But that,
similar
yeah,
understanding
that's
then?
exactly what that is. I mean,
Yeah,
everything is frequency at the end of the day. The rate at which you tap back and forth is, is measured in hertz, and like you can, that is a oscillation of,
totally.
and what is expressed as a
Of
frequency.
course.
So, this is all to say that like they're that this one, I think that this is kind of a niche lane of science, but just because it is niche doesn't mean that it's not completely rooted in what are known physical phenomena that are well measured and confirmed by EEGs,
Hmm.
uh, the the brainwave.
Electroencephalographs are the little
Yeah, thank you
dots on your
for
head. Yeah,
helping me out with that. I wasn't going to try and rattle that off the top of my head,
all
so
good.
I appreciate you with the alley oop. And yeah, they so there is a lot of like there are some avenues of this work that you know that are totally scientifically backed. But that being said, I, there is the other side of the coin. The same coin is that um, there is an air of mysticism to it because we still don't totally understand why and how good music that resonates with
Oh yeah.
us, like really will change the way that you think and feel in a moment's notice more quickly than any sort of pill that's ever been manufactured can. And there's a hot, topic and debate between musicians and scientists alike that are trying to kind of still figure that out, and it's still very, if ephemeral or whatever. It's not clear and obvious. So what I find interesting about this space is, one, I want to sort of bring my analytical scientific lens into it and kind of help uh, establish kind of more legitimacy into it, while also dabbling into the realm of the unknown and kind of the fun mystical aspect of things. Because like as as analytical as I am, I'm not really, I don't come from a line of like, my family isn't like this at all. Like the people that I've been influenced by in my personal life, and the people who raised me and all of that, they're actually way more hippie and like fun loving and free and everything. Like literally, my mom wouldn't take me to the doctor unless necessary, uh, and would rub like essential oils all over the bottom of my feet and like cook up these crazy tinctures in the kitchen when I get sick. And as a kid, I was like, what do I had my own thoughts on that. It's like, how is this going to help or whatever? But I just knew it was kind of it was like her thing.
It's a way of
And
showing
other,
love.
yeah, exactly. And then my dad has had this resonance therapy machine that he swears by, and he uses every day. That it is a pad, and like it's these metal rods that he holds on to that send vibrations through your body, and they're supposed to like cure ailments, uh, of a bunch of all types, apparently. Literally, just if you have a sore knee
Everything.
or like HPV, it's like, I don't know how that is like all in the same category of. But I don't know how this works at all. But like so I've always been around this kind of world of like uh, alternative healing. I grew up that way, and for a very long time, sort of rejected it, I guess, or I felt like going into science was probably the right move. But I think naturally, there's just kind of been this like return to where I started. It kind of comes full circle, and I'm opening up more. And I do genuinely think in my adulthood, my mom and dad were pretty right about their skepticism for just peddling like pharmaceuticals. That was one thing that they shared. And like I said, I was at the heart of the pharmaceutical industry with the surgeries that I had. Like I was given, when I was 14 years old, I was given Oxycontin because I was hospitalized for 2 weeks from a surgery. And I had an allergic reaction to Oxycontin, and I genuinely think that saved my life
Yeah, thank
because,
goodness for that, mate.
yeah,
Just think of that.
I I cannot. Every day. This was in the wake of 2008 or 2009. This was kind of the beginning of. There's documentaries now, really great documentaries about this this opioid epidemic in the United States, and I was kind of like, you know, caught in the middle of that peripherally, and I got like really lucky because I've heard stories and I've seen people really suffer, and I don't think that pharmaceuticals are always the answer to a lot of our ailments. It's fascinating to be in a space that's like kind of separate from that.
Yeah, well, that's my personal take as well. I just want to remark on what I've been thinking as you've been talking. Is it's a very your journey looks a lot like the hero's journey, Kyle. I think it's beautiful. This there's in sort of two ways. In one way you are in this thing that you thought might be the right thing. It's the world of medicine. You're relatively comfortable there. You're doing well, and you're thinking, okay, I need to step out into something new. And it also there's like an ancestral component to that. It's like there's something in your roots that's calling you to that, and I think that's part of the hero's journey that's not always spoken about. And then you said you were talking about this interplay between the mystic dimension of the culture, I guess, around sound healing, sound bath, sound work, and then the scientific side of that, and that you're leaning really into the scientific side. You find that really interesting, but you want to step out into
Mm-hmm.
that unknown area and try to gather some of it in and find
Yeah,
something that makes sense there and bring it back. And that's the hero's journey. You go out into the unknown and you integrate together. So I think that I'm stoked for you that you found something that feels exciting and important and personal for you.
yeah. Thank you, man. I know that like it was never an option in my head to stop uh, playing with or immersing myself in sound and music, even when I was in university and in school, uh, just in general, I felt like I, had to constantly be hitting the books, but like sometimes I would take a few months of a break without opening up like the digital audio workstation, the tool that I use to make music, or picking up my guitar or something like that. I'd go like 3 months without touching it just from life getting in the way. But there was always the draw to pull back and go back to it. It was never an option that I considered to myself, maybe I should just stop this hobby, like maybe put it down, like I've done with other things. Like I was like, I'm not going to code. Like I can't code. I'm not doing that. And, other things even before that, I've considered being like an author or whatever, like
You
there's
gave
been
up on
other
crypto.
things. Yeah, the crypto game is really not for me. Uh, stuff like that. It's like the in my brain has always found I'm pretty good about reaching a point where I can make the decision confidently. This is not for me. Like I can get out of it. I'm glad I tried it, but it's time to exit. That was never ever an option or a thought when it comes to music and sound. And so, sticking through, and I never wanted to. So even with that being said, I never wanted to jump into the music industry either. Like I actually agree, or I think that the music industry is just as toxic and crazy and hectic as pharmaceuticals and everything. It's like the parallel
Fair enough.
of like perhaps evil. Evil's an intense word, but like they both in my head don't seem like comforting places for my soul to reside in, is kind of the best way I could put
That's a great way
that.
to put it.
So I and that meant confusion for most of my adult life, knowing everything that I just said to be true. I've just been confused about like, okay, well, what the hell do I do with that information? I can't just, I feel like I can't really just be a regular musician. And I also can't do the science thing. So finding this avenue has felt unique. It's given me sort of a unique opportunity to explore something that doesn't feel like I'm compromising it, I guess.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, and it sounds like that's a driving value of yours. And I know something you said in the questionnaire I put out before this podcast is that you've been making sort of a switch in your why, I guess, away from doing something grand and important and impressive or whatever to doing something that is really really real to you. And I think
Yeah.
that's that's a sign of maturity. I think that's fantastic, and I think it's necessary for the hero's journey as well, because to do something grand and important is to see a path that's been laid out, see a game that's being played, and try to get in there. But to do what's authentic, is to see, it's to step out again. It's to step out, right, and then bring something back that only you can bring back. So yeah, I can see that dynamic. I'm looking at your life and I'm seeing like three threads that all are coming together with what you're doing right now. There's of course your lifelong music with journey with music, and then there's your interest in healing as a phenomenon from your time. Maybe there's a connection there between your obviously experiences being in and out of the hospital as a young person,
Mhm.
and then there's the whole psychology, self help, all of that. Um, and I'm curious. I know you said before we did the intro and that on this call, you said that you really just downloaded. I don't know if you meant that like in terms of mentally or like on your computer, but you downloaded a lot of self help books when you're
Mhm.
going through a dark time at uni. And
Mhm.
I'm curious, I guess, what role your time, because you brought it up a few times, being in and out of the hospital as a young person, what role has that had on your journey with music? What role has that had on your journey with self help and with healing? Because it's clearly
Yeah.
coming up as part of this.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, it was so, you know, being hospital, I guess. So what I had was a chest. I was born with a chest deformity. Like, it was called pectus excavatum. It basically is just like my sternum is like sunk in naturally. You might
Oh
have
yeah,
met people with it.
yeah.
It's
I have
actually
I've
relatively.
known a couple of people with that. Yeah, yeah,
There you go. Mine was just really aggressive. It went pretty far in. Um, it was like a little bowl. Like if I'm laying down and I'm eating like popcorn or something, like stuff would just kind of fall in there and catch it. It's pretty sweet. We used to like pour cereal and like milk in there. It's like, just kid
Why
stuff,
not? Yeah, yeah.
uh, but it was, that was the fun part. That was the pros of having that. The cons were it was like kind of it would interfere a little bit with my heartbeat because my rib cage was kind of like closer to my heart. So if I sit in a weird position, my heart would beat on my rib cage, and it was a very startling feeling. So had to get that fixed, and then so that was one surgery. Then uh, that was before I hit puberty. So I hit puberty and then I grew really quickly. Like and it was kind of late too. Like, I was like sophomore year in high school or something. And I grew like 6 inches taller in like 2 months. Like it was literally just the most insane, dramatic
How
growth spurt.
painful, but
Yeah.
wild.
I was on edge all the time. My body hurt and everybody was like, what is happening? But so that sort of caused more, kind of chaos in, I guess, my chest and my back area because I developed scoliosis after that. Like, I mean, I don't know about New Zealand, but in America, they did, in PE, they had everybody like test in middle school for scoliosis. They would like get us all in a line and then they'd like inspect our spines and be like, you don't have it next.
No, I think they
Um,
test earlier here.
Earlier than that? All
Yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah.
fair. Good on them. We got it like middle school, and I totally passed. And apparently, it's about that time or sooner that you would start showing signs of it. It's pretty rare that you like go under the radar there and then get it later in adulthood. That's almost unheard of. Um, and yet that did happen. And it started going really aggressive, basically, like just a crazy scoliosis curve that advanced so far that we just needed to go in and do like an emergency surgery. So they fused my spine to two metal rods basically, and then I had to like relearn how to walk and stuff like that. And sorry if this is heavy for you. I think that I think that that all is, it's impossible um, for me. At that time, it just kind of felt like everything was like cascading against me. I was like, I can't just be like a regular person. I'm like 12 to 18 years old. It's like that bracket of time that I was like, why can't I just go do regular stuff? Like, that's all I want, whatever. And I'm like in and out of physical therapy, doctor's offices, hospitals, whatever. And so the only thing that really felt comforting the whole time was just listening to good music. Like I would spend my time listening to albums the same way that people watch movies, like
Mm,
full albums were a listening experience for me. And I value that medium a lot. Which is, by the way, kind of like a dying medium, which I feel, that has its own kind of
the
interesting effects
album?
with the streaming. Yeah, I mean, I kind of think streaming services are set up in a way where singles are sort of way more effective of a strategy, and I think
Interesting.
that record sales dying off. I mean, they're kind of made a comeback, but like nonetheless, like it's not important for an artist to like really make an album at nearly as much as it was 10, 20, 30 years ago and such. um, which is a little bit of a shame because it does kind of feel like it's a nice thoughtful artistic piece that can really sort of be entertaining in and of itself. It's a completely side topic, but um, yeah, I don't know how I danced around your question necessarily, but I mean, like all those things put together just sort of reminded me that it's just important that um, I help people in the same way that feels authentic to me. Like music helped me more than anything else. Like it's the
Mm.
it it truly makes me feel fully alive when I'm listening to good music. And like I if that's the only way I know how to sort of help other people feel fully alive, then that's what I'll do. That's kind of the only way I could articulate it, I think.
Well, that's well said. I think I know exactly what you mean from that. Um,
I would like to, because I've been
yeah.
talking a lot and I am curious about you. What are the things that make you feel fully alive?
Oh, well, thanks for asking. I am the host and you're the guest, but I'm happy to answer your question. I mean, that's a focus for me as well, and I think that's one of the things we resonate on, Kyle, is just that yearning for, yeah, just having access to that sense of feeling fully alive, um, and not residing in it 100% of the time, and a yearning for that being a major why for me. Um,
Mm,
yeah, it is, and I think what makes me feel truly alive is adventure and adventure with others, particularly. And what that means, that can look like novelty, that can look like extreme challenge, it can look like working towards a mighty aspiration, but it's something like, um, I've never been here before, and there's only one thing to do, and I'm trying to figure out how all these different things work. Like situations where it's demanded that I'm reacting moment to moment. That's what makes me
yeah.
feel most fully alive.
Are you like an outdoorsy person? Would
Yeah,
you say?
I get pretty into it. I mean, it's something that's a bit impaired by being a parent, although not entirely. We take my son tramping. I have a little chair thing that I sit up on my shoulders, and we go for it. I didn't grow up with it at all, like not really much of the outdoorsy stuff. So it's something I've built on my own. But yeah, it's becoming a pretty big part of my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's another thing too. I try to and I'm trying to introduce camping and being out in nature a lot more.
It's a good combo with
It
music.
feels, yeah, man, 100%. And like there, you can do like listening meditations in nature. Also, there's a creek that's like right behind my house, and it's like, I'm not like in the woods or anything. And definitely, it's like a small little creek in a neighborhood. But you go out there early in the morning, and you can kind of just hear this. You can meditate on the sounds that are around you. You hear the birds and the flowing water, and the wind rustling through trees and such, and like there is something so deeply grounding about that
Hmm.
experience. Um, Meditating with with sounds of nature is just so it's so much easier to stick to the practice, I think.
Absolutely. Something that I'm seeing a thread of connection there between music and nature. I mean, of course, maybe someone with your personal interests and experiences would lean into the sounds of nature when out there.
Hmm.
Um, but I would imagine that there are very similar mechanisms at play in the way just hearing nature and hearing music um, enters you into an altered state of consciousness. I was referencing the book a lot on Mindform a few weeks ago, The Master and His Emissary, which is all about the right brain, left brain dynamic, and music and nature both have we both primarily act through a right brain sort of type of focusing in those contexts because
Hmm.
there's this sense of oh, you reading it, Ryan? That's cool,
Nice.
man. I'm glad. We can definitely, yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. Maybe make a post about it or something. But yeah, they both demand a mode of attending where we are alert to the thread of time. You have to remain in the present moment in order to catch the way that sounds change and spaces change each moment. And yeah, and so there's something to like the feeling of being fully alive. Maybe is partly it's the feeling of not operating left brain, which is like ideas, goals, and action steps, and the objects that the world is made of, but more operating in a right brain, which is like open attention, immediate responsiveness, and more subtle forms of thinking. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I it reminds me of one of the few times that we have chatted live before, and it was at least a year ago, but I was sitting at this desk, so it wasn't much more than a year ago. And you were talking about this experience you had. You went out into the wild somewhere, into the Grand Canyon, maybe it was. I don't remember with
Oh,
some
Yosemite. It was probably
Yosemite.
Yosemite
Yeah, yeah,
National
yeah.
Park.
With your mates, and you
Yeah.
had this feeling being in this pool of just being absolutely present, just being alive, just being there for life. Um, and it seemed
Yeah,
like
man.
that had a big impact on you that steered your focus into what is that gets me that feeling.
I think you're right, actually. I hadn't thought about that, but that was a deeply transformative experience. I don't know, that Yosemite National Park is one of the most beautiful places. It is the most beautiful place I've ever seen, hands down. I'm not a worldly traveled man, but like that is an unbelievable space that like there I was really in touch with like a bigger thing, the higher power was really there. And yeah, I guess I had never really thought that that reminded me how important nature is to me, and the natural world. Like I was talking, I had a with my family. My family was talking about like past lives. That's something my mother believes in, and is like talking about people might not even be people's spirits might not even be from this planet. See, again, this is how I was raised. I was around conversations like this, and I I basically chimed in at a point, and I'm like, I think I'm my soul is like deeply from here. Like if that is even true, that spirits are from other solar systems or whatever, right? Or past lives and everything like that. Like if we're gonna go really deep into that kind of thing, it's like there's something I'm still so confident about, that like I'm really from Earth. Like I love it here
Yeah.
so much, So much. I
Yeah,
love the
man.
natural world. I used to grow up watching a lot of nature documentaries with my dad. My dad's from South Africa. He grew up
So
in
is
South
mine.
Africa for first 30 years of his life and then came here to America. And technically, he's a little north of South Africa. I just say that because most people don't know about Rhodesia, which is now called Zimbabwe. But yeah, he's from Zimbabwe. And anyways, he and I would watch a lot of nature documentaries because it would give him sort of an opportunity to be like, okay, that, like, I was there, because there was a lot of like, you know, what is it, safari, it would
Yeah,
be a lot of
yeah,
like Africa stuff, and he would point out stuff and he'd be like, I used to go to primary school next to a watering hole that looked like this. We would all go out there and like have our lunch and watch the water buffalo and all this. Like, it was a moment for him to like tell me about his life that he clearly missed so much.
right.
He misses Africa like you wouldn't believe. But yeah, anyways, that obviously is like just really, I think that has deeply informed what I think is valuable in life. It's like you got to be a part of nature again.
Yeah, my dad's from South. Both of my parents are from South Africa, more like South, like Cape Town and that. And
Wow,
and I've
that's
been
awesome, man.
there a number of times in my life, and I feel like I'm from there. And although I'm not, I was born here. And my dad has the same like extreme nostalgia about just Africa.
Yeah,
And he always wants to go back there, and he collects paintings from his auntie who's over there of the different landscapes and that, and he has all these different wooden animals, and he still collects
wow.
whatever animals he can legally collect in New Zealand, and yeah, and I think it speaks to, because I feel the same way about Africa, and I think it does speak to the feeling of being at home, and simultaneously a feeling of aliveness that comes from being small in a big wild place. I mean, even when
Mm.
you're right in Cape Town City, which is a huge city,
Hmm.
um, it feels wild because, one, there's such an insane diversity of people. You can see Table Mountain there, and the ocean's there, and it's the almost the Antarctic Ocean, and and you go up the mountain, you go through the streets. There's we see snakes around, tortoises. You go up the mountain, and there's all these quirky little animals, and you don't go far, and you're seeing all sorts of incredible life, and it's just a huge landscape, right? I mean, New Zealand, I mean, America's a huge landscape. The USA is massive, as well. But of course, most people live in a really like huge the whole area they live in. They're here, and all the land for miles and miles and miles is completely tamed. But it's not really like that in Africa. And in New Zealand, it's not like that because we just don't have that much land. Um, and so, yeah, I think it just speaks to the nostalgia that our dads both feel. Really speaks to the aliveness that comes from being in the wild.
Yeah. Does your dad have a really thick accent? Like, and is it
Not
South
at all.
African?
He sounds like every other Kiwi. My mum has a little bit of an accent, but she
Okay.
just sounds kind of like a weird, slightly posh, maybe, which a lot of Kiwis sound like, because like the older generation kind of still have slightly English accents. Some of them, a lot of people came from
Because
England, so yeah.
the South African accent is like pretty particular. It does
It's
kind of sound
very hard to do. I've been to
right.
South
It's
Africa so
very
many
hard.
times. I cannot do the South African accent.
But I know it when I hear it because my dad's is still just so
Oh,
thick,
cool.
like,
Yeah.
and his accent is, he's been holding on to it for, 30 years or so now, here in America. But I know it when I hear it, and like, but yeah, it is the hardest to replicate. But it sounds so close to British, but you can tell it kind of isn't. A little bit like Aussie. The untrained ear is like I can't pinpoint it.
It is hard for
But
some people to they're like, where are you from? What is going on?
yeah, 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 100%. But I thought I was starting to second guess after you said that your parents are from South Africa. I was starting to listen to you, and I'm like, does he have it? Does Frank have that accent a little
Not
bit in
even a
there? Am
little.
I hearing
I
it?
do say in New Zealand you say like get off the couch, but in South African you
Uh,
say off. And
yeah,
for
definitely.
growing up, I said get off.
Yeah, you
Anyway,
don't.
so that is just one example. How old are you, by the way, Kyle? I've
Uh,
been trying to get a read on that, but
how old do you think I am?
well, you don't give off older than 30 energy, so I'm gonna say younger than 30. Um, I'm gonna say 27.
Pretty good guess. I'm 29. Yeah,
Yeah,
you pretty much got it.
pretty good guess.
I get people think I'm like 20. Yeah, I guess lately it's been different. The past 2 years, this has not been the case, but I would, up until I was like 24 years old, people were like, you don't even look 18. Like when I had a clean shaven face 2 years
Right.
ago, I look like a baby. So I've always been a little bit baby faced. Um, but it's, yeah, I think you're on point that I have the young energy, I guess. That is, um, I hope that stays. I don't want that to go away. I kind of like the idea that I'm like 40 years old and still kind of like goofing off and stuff. But
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Same. Very important. I mean that's I think that's connected to what we've already been talking about, right? That's the feeling of aliveness. You know, life's a playground. I'm excited to be here. Not I'm in a routine. I'm just going through it. Yeah. And speaking of that, this is a question I had written down that I want to ask you about. Is like, um, there seems to be that shift that you've talked about, of course, getting more into what speaks to me, what speaks to my soul, and sound healing, and exploring that, and then that calling of like what makes me feel most alive. I'm curious how your approach to psychotecture, as into
mm,
managing your own mind, like growing yourself, and all of that, how that has changed in sort of the last 3 to 5 years. Like, what's been a major shift for you in your approach there?
yeah, definitely. Um, I, well, first of all, uh, I found out, I'm a founding member at Mindform, because I was so deeply moved by Ryan's first book, Designing the Mind. It was just like right place, right time for me to read that. And I think that the um, the compulsion that I had to try and change my mind and to try and design it to the best of my ability came from the phase in my life where I felt like, all right, something has to change. I clearly need to the status quo is not something I'm comfortable with. Um,
Mm,
and I think that I've always kind of been a self-aware individual. I don't know what that is necessarily. Like, I think it has to do with maybe like a sense of humor or something that kind of makes me feel I that I don't. I naturally was raised around people who don't take themselves too seriously. I think like it was kind of just like a fun. So it was easy for me to kind of point out my flaws in what feels like a kind of healthy way, and I was able to kind of um, start there, where it's like, all right,
that is, you need that to
I,
start, don't you?
yeah, yeah, I think that I've somehow intuitively, I was just lucky that I was able to kind of rely on that as like a basis of even if I haven't learned anything about how to how to get my shit together. I had this kind of like foundation of feeling like, all right, this is what I don't like about the way I act or the way my life is going. And I liked to write a lot, just journaling, stream of consciousness type journaling. And all of that was sort of important to lead me to Ryan's first book, because Ryan kind of accomplished what I felt like where I fell short, which was the systematic approach of things,
Mm,
being
hmm.
like really systematized about everything. Like that is something to this day that I lean on other minds to accomplish for me, like the people around me. I like to kind of leverage their minds to help form a system of action plans because I can sort of easily identify the landscape, but I can't quite nail down the intricacies of making a path forward. And so when I was reading Designing the Mind and learning about like CBT is another especially useful strategy for me. When I was reading about all of that, it sort of was the yin to my yang in a sense. And that motivated me a lot because I kind of see systematic and a systems view of life as a really creative art.
Totally.
I see it as art because it's something in the same way that like when you watch a really good musical performance, it's like you're enamored by it and you love it, and it's art in part because you know that you in your current state can't do that, and that's okay. It's like that's
But yeah,
kind
the
of
joy of
the
just being able to receive it as part of the art, the experience of viewing art. Yeah.
absolutely. So it's not about like, oh, I'll never be able to do that or anything like that. But it is like, wow, that's so special because that's somebody was able to do this. So that inspired me enough to be more, to pick up the slack on the strategizing, and making a systematic plan of like, how can I get my life to a place where I'm truly content with it, right? The status quo I don't like, and how are we going to get to where we need to be, right? And at the same time, I sort of also fell into Notion, which
Yeah.
I
I was
felt
going to bring
like
that up. Yeah.
again is another tool that is structured in a way where you're systematizing everything. You can kind of choose to make a systematic approach to anything in life with that software, right? And so the marriage of those two worlds is what I was able to marry the principles of psychotecture with uh, with Notion and how I personally use Notion to sort of guide myself on a daily basis
Mm.
toward um, toward becoming the type of man that is very disciplined and has his shit together and knows how to keep his room clean and whatever, has goals and aspirations and stuff like, and not just some like not just some kid with his head in the clouds. I think, and that's all without even saying how fun and useful it is to be a part of the sort of book club aspect of Mindform, where every month, you're kind of reading and discussing very insightful literature on just wisdom in general. Um, yeah, I think I just associate myself. A main part of the action plan is associating myself with a community of individuals who are better at being systematic
Essential,
and kind
mate.
of, yeah, and
Yeah.
sort of, if I can just be part of the crew in that way, then it naturally raises my ability to keep up. You know,
Yeah. No,
um,
I can absolutely relate to that. Being someone who feels it out, has got a lot of ideas, but not always the whatever, whether they're cognitive skills or planning skills or whatever, to particularly and consistently turn that into real realities, like tangible realities. And it's absolutely the same for me. I mean, I think for anyone, community in these journeys or any journey is really, really important. But I think when you are really, really strong in one skill or tendency, like curiosity, passion, creativity, and just not in another area, then being in a community is really profoundly impactful, because that's the whole function, right? Is that we
definitely.
bring everyone's skills are exchangeable, and we benefit from each other's strengths, and
Yeah,
are not
yeah.
so
I
much
mean,
harmed by each other's weaknesses. Yeah,
I feel like that's human beings at their peak.
totally.
Like we collectively are better than the sum of our parts. Like that has always felt obviously true to me.
Mm. Something I really appreciate that I've been noticing on this call is and it's very right brain, so to speak, of you, is that is the way that you answer questions with story and with experience. I just think that's it's really entertaining, and it really brings out new ideas.
Oh,
So yeah, I just
thanks,
noticed
man.
that. No, all good, mate.
It's
All
how
good.
I was raised. My dad is the best storyteller ever,
I
honestly.
was gonna guess
Um,
that, honestly. That was
yeah,
my intuition. With your parents being quote unquote hippies, that was your word, not
yeah,
mine. You said it first.
yeah,
Then
yeah,
that
definitely.
sounds like something that might come along with that.
And I think I
Yeah.
I also it aligns with my on the topic of psychotecture and I guess wisdom. I think story is the most effective strategy for imparting wisdom. Like it truly story is the greatest like psychotechnology that humans have ever come up with, aside from like just humor. I mean humor, I guess. And maybe I'm loosely using psychotechnology here. I'm not the subject matter expert per se, but I whatever it is that compels us to impart information in the form of story is the greatest possible achievement for our brains. I think it's
I
incredible.
agree. I agree, and I've been leaning more into that. I mean, I don't know if you've been seeing it, but I didn't end up finishing. But I was doing Growth Accelerator for a little while, and
Right on.
pardon me, I just got to clear my throat. Yeah, I was doing Growth Accelerator for a little while, and my focus, which is still a focus in my life, and I'm still putting a bit of time into it, is figuring out how to communicate effectively. And obviously, this podcast is part of the reason that that's an interest of mine, and part of a place. It's a place where I can practice it as well. But something I'm really settling on is the power and the importance of story as a way of relaying information. For an array of reasons. I mean, I've set up a Substack, and I'm writing all these ideas and trying to articulate them well enough so that people who read it are getting some benefit. And writing about communication methods, and I'm trying to deduce these core principles of what makes a difference for communication. Some of them are like, emotions before reason. Like, people need to feel connected and regulated in order to think about reasons, but also emotions are the why and the context behind reasons. And then there's like deep listening and empathy is really important, right? Because you need to relate as equal beings for that sense of safety, and you're going to uncover information you're not aware of when you really listen. And story ties like all of this stuff together. I mean, it's this acknowledgement of us as complex human beings whose lives are built out of experiences, and even our ideas, they're just deductions that we've made from experiences, right? So you go back to that level that is most real to us, and at the base of our processing, you really can relay ideas really effectively. And one
Yeah.
of so I go to church every week, and well, not every week, but and I don't really identify as a Christian, but I'm like part of that world, and I find a lot of the ideas and that history really true and resonate, and including the person of Jesus. And one of the, obviously whatever went on there, a religion spread across the entire Mediterranean area really, really rapidly. And
Hmm.
this person of Jesus, he's like talks in stories, he talks in parables, right? And so
Hmm.
I went and I looked at that as an example of, okay, well, this is clearly a very powerful communicator. How did he do it? And it's just always through stories. So yeah, I'm with you, mate.
Yeah.
Stories.
And you know, every everybody sort of hmm, we live in a time where world religions, the religious institutions are sort of not as ubiquitous as they once
Mm,
were all throughout history.
of course.
And I recognize and validate that there's there are a lot of complicated discussions on pros and cons of religious institutions completely. Um, all of that being said, one of the most effective and uh, most useful and genuinely uplifting aspects of being an individual that is subscribed to or part of a typical religious institution such as Christianity, Catholicism, etc., one of the greatest um, assets that serves you as an individual is your exposure to perennial life problems in the form of story. I like you go to church, and if you are open-minded to the sermons, again, and I don't, if you're open-minded to the sermons and all of that, at the end of the day, I think their goal is really to share stories about what it means to be a good person, examples of evil in this world, transgressions, and the juxtaposing of these two, and how complicated life is, and how to sort of help each other be better as a community, and all of that. Like the themes that underlie all of the discourse, the sermons, and all of that, they're all basically important for us to hear in some capacity somewhere. Like that kind of information is important for an individual to hear, just about how the world works and how history has played out. And there's really only a few venues to receive that information, and those venues are like religious institutions. Otherwise, in a secular world, where do you go for that? You go to like Hollywood, I guess, and you go to books, and you go elsewhere, which is fine, but you are kind of subject to falling into echo chambers and sort of like kind of weird agendas of the people making the media and the content. It's like, this is an extremely complicated topic, but the point that I'm trying to get at here is like, it is kind of nice to have a reliable source of receiving wisdom, and wisdom through story specifically, because it's easier to digest that way. Like it just works.
Great. Yeah. And I think maybe just in an effort to help you articulate what you're saying, because I think I understand, is that there's a whole of the world is this complex, crazy landscape of really hard to understand things. I mean, even the physical world is complex enough, but then there's the interaction, right, between the world of being a human and engaging there. And we can try to talk about it explicitly, and we do that in the sciences and in other contexts, and we use story to navigate that landscape. And of course, these world religions that have been collections of people telling stories to each other for thousands of years, and a lot of them have roots even further back than that in oral traditions. Like some of these stories, you find reflections of them all over the world and such. And so it's the stories, the narratives that have some degree of deep and ubiquitous truth to the human experience, and that have sustained. It's kind of like the idea of a meme, right? Like Richard Dawkins' meme. They've perpetuated, they've survived for a long time because they serve this purpose. And when there's a big difference between that and stories that are popular right now, or stories that sell right now, or stories that are made in order to make money right now. I mean, there's just, the why is so different, and there's
very well said.
Yeah, you can really trust the functional impact of a story that survived that long and been built that slowly, much more than the functional impact of a story that that has such a shorter history and a more arbitrary context through which it was built. Yeah,
that's beautiful. I think you're really onto something. And when you said that, it kind of helped me realize something too. It's like part of why I'm frustrated with being a wholly scientific minded person, like why I'm frustrated with being 100% scientifically minded and nothing else, is because science is not supposed to, it doesn't, and it's not supposed to explain why, or like bigger purposes, and like really it is not the place to get that information from.
I wonder if the philosopher who said this, or maybe someone in the chat does, but you can't get an ought from an is the quickest way to say it, right? And I love that. Exactly. I love that quote. Yeah. And it's indisputable, basically, as well.
Ryan said Hume.
Hume, there you go. Oh, really? Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Hume. Oh, true. No, I missed a few of these chats. No, Vin says future Mindform retreat options. No, it has to be New Zealand, I insist. So that's decided already. Sorry.
And
Ryan just followed me on Substack. That's so nice. Yeah, listeners, follow me on Substack. I'll eventually get around to publishing my first article. Sorry, Kyle, I'm totally distracted. What were you just
That's
saying?
all right. It's hard to manage the chat and
Yeah, it's a bit
and
tricky.
go this
Yeah,
deep
I'm
in
learning.
conversation. But yeah, man, I think that yeah, like you can't we the world is pretty secular. It's like predominantly secular now, and also science is kind of like the the thing for um, data and information. It's like we're science first. Like, and it's like at the end, as beautiful and valuable as that is, we have to still make room for uh, for quenching our thirst for like
Absolutely, of course.
bigger questions of why. And like
Yeah,
those avenues don't really exist outside of Mindform, of course. But like, but culture, I mean, that's what Mindform is
yeah, mate.
that's the mission statement of Mindform itself. So
I agree, and I would love to see, and I think it's actually coming in with like lovely people like Brandy is a great example. More of um, the soft, I guess, way of articulating all of this in the mindful space, like using story, connecting, and that's part of the purpose of this podcast as well. It's to bring out like human
yeah,
level soft connection, so that we're doing more than just exchanging these explicit ideas. We're going a layer deeper, and so I'm really excited about the future of the platform for that reason.
I
You may have noticed we have passed the hour. I do have a last question I ask all of the guests, but it's probably about time to wrap it up. So my question to you is, well, based on everything we've said, based on this conversation, what is like a one core idea or maybe a tool that you want to leave with me and the people in the chat and the listeners? Yeah, just something that you think it's important for people to hear.
um I like I like really short quotes that I feel like are surprisingly deceptively valuable. So I'm gonna just leave a quote. Um, I think Carl Jung said, "Life is what you try to live." That's
Mm,
that's what I'm leaving you with. Life
that's
is
great.
what you try to live.
That's enough, mate. That is definitely enough. Yeah, thank you so much. I really, really, really enjoyed this
You're the
conversation
man.
and getting to know more about you and your life, Kyle.
I had so much fun with this, man. You're the man. This podcast is a brilliant idea for Mindform. Please keep it up. This is wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to say, yeah, like from this call, um, yeah, I feel like really encouraged and inspired around leaning into the soft, leaning into the felt, leaning into the authentic and the story and the human. I think
Hmm.
that's sort of the thing that's stirring within me after talking to you. So thank you for like being a representative of that. Thank you for
Oh,
being excited about that. I guess that's the life that you're trying to live, or whatever the language there was from the Carl Jung quote.
yeah.
So cheers for that,
Yeah, man.
mate. And
It was my pleasure.
yeah, awesome. Okay, yeah, thanks for coming on. Thank you for listening, people who've been listening. And yeah, that's it for us
Cool.
today. Cheers. Bye bye. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to the Mindform Podcast. I'm Ryan A. Bush, founder and author of Designing the Mind and creator of Mindform. Mindform is an exclusive community and training platform for sculpting your psychological software. Members get access to a group of like-minded psychotechs, including all of our guests on this podcast, gamified growth tools, events and retreats, and a collection of transformative programs for mental health and self-mastery. You can learn more and apply to join at mindform.io. I hope to see you inside.